Well, one thing you can say, there's a lot of crossover in subject matters in what we're talking about, so it's not surprising that there's workforce questions for a panel looking at research and policy issues in California. But that's the nature of this field, especially the advanced air mobility question. It's going to affect so many different aspects of life. So I think it's worth having these kinds of discussions. And now we have our next panel, which is going to take up the topic of Airspace Integration Corridors. And I'm looking for our panelists out there. There's James Parrish and John Eberhardt, Matt Beatty, and Matt Nelson. And there's Matt Nelson coming on up. And then our other folks, Chris, I assume they're in the back. But welcome to the Airspace Integration Corridor discussion. This has been a topic that we covered yesterday in some form in our workshops, and it's really, I think, intended to further kind of raise up this idea that we have been entertaining for some time, that having capabilities to support UAS operations integration here on the Central Coast would support our economic development goals by being another place-based reason for people to be here. There's Chris. There's Matt. Okay, welcome. Come on stage. And so these gentlemen are going to discuss that subject in some range of conversation. Who are we missing? Matt Beatty. He's got to be making his way up. And I think further clarify what the subject matter is, what some of the considerations might be, what examples there are of things happening in other places, and what we might learn from those to inform what we would take on in the coming work in front of us. So, gentlemen, the floor is yours, and I'll find Matt Beatty and get him up here.
Okay, hello everybody. My name is Chris Bley, and I have a very awesome panel here, and Matt's making his way up here. But Jimmy Parrish, Matt Nelson, John Eberhardt, and Matt Beatty, he's coming on up. So our focus on this conversation is on airspace innovation corridors. What are they, what value do they provide, and how are they created and managed? So, I'm going to start off and give a little introduction to myself. So I'm Chris Bley. I've been in this region for quite some time. I went to UC Santa Cruz in the early 80s and was able to stick around and had several startup businesses, one in renewable energy where we rappelled down wind turbines. And that evolved into another business where we use drones to do high-resolution imagery of blades and then put that information into a database so we could see the condition of the rotor blades. But that really got me involved in aviation and the need for airspace and managing airspace. So I currently manage a grass airfield on the Monterey Bay. And there's certain things that, that become reality when you're managing an airport like Matt does in Marina, or an airstrip. Is that the one big fear I have is that we're flying drones around the area and people come through with planes and buzz the airfield. So this creates an area of conflict, which is very dangerous. You know, if you ever had a conflict between a manned aircraft and a drone, that's really bad news. So I'd like to start off with Jimmy. We're going to show a video here of University of Alaska Fairbanks. You could stand up or, yeah, whatever works for you. And can we cue the video, please?
So the fundamental question everybody asks is why Alaska? Why do we have one of the best drone programs in the entire country here in Alaska? And the answer is we have a need. The impact of this technology is going to be massive. We save lives with it. We improve quality of life with it. We help keep the best and brightest in our state. You know, it's a case where There are so many opportunities. It's very hard to encompass just how exciting this is and how many different ways this is going to touch people. So ACUASI is the University of Alaska's Center of Excellence for Unmanned Aircraft Research. You'll know unmanned aircraft as drones, and we are working on safely integrating drones with manned aircraft, traditional aircraft, in the airspace. And the whole purpose of what we're doing is to do this safely.
Instruments, last instrument check.
So these are long distance missions in the airspace where you are not seeing the aircraft in the space around it with your own naked eye.
Brakes coming off, full throttle.
You are requiring electronics through radar or onboard cameras to identify potential hazards in the airspace. So we've done everything from looking for whales in the St. Lawrence Seaway to flying over wildfires and looking at fire behavior. We've done monitoring of pipelines. We've measured glaciers and their motion. So there's a tremendous amount of stuff you can do with an unmanned aircraft on the scientific front. Then additionally, there's the whole aspect of how do you benefit Alaskans. The key thing here is a lot of what we are looking at doing is stuff that is really not that safe to do using traditional aircraft. So if you're in a remote community, the only way you get goods is they're flown in. Well, that can be really risky for the pilot. So if we can get, milk and diapers out to the villages on a more regular basis, we actually are changing people's lives and helping them live in the place they want to be. And we're a part of that. The university has given me a tremendous opportunity. I never would have believed that I would be running one of the top drone programs in the world. I wouldn't have had that opportunity at other universities. And a lot of our employees are getting to experience that same sort of empowerment. And it's exciting. We are on the cutting edge. We are proposing missions no one has ever done. This is something that is going to help people. It's going to increase safety and improve the quality of life.
Okay, thank you guys. That was our quick kind of 3-minute promo. My name is Jimmy Parrish, and I'm the business director for the Alaska Center for UAS Integration at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. Quick little more about us. We are one of the 7 test sites for UAS integration for the FAA. We are also one of the original 15, now 18 core schools in the FAA's Center of Excellence for Safety for Drone Integration, ASSURE. And then we are also one of the 8 leads on commercialization of drones in the National Airspace Program under the FAA called their Beyond program. And that was originally the Integration Pilot Program, which was a presidential order back in 2018 under President Trump. Yes, as the video mentioned, our big key is safe integration in the national airspace. Just to give a little bit of perspective of what we're dealing with in Alaska, for those that don't know, Alaska is more than twice the size of the state of Texas. We're a 5th in land mass of the United States, but less than 20% of our state is accessible by road. And so when you look at the vastness of what we're trying to do and also the lack of infrastructure of our state and how we're trying to do that, this is really the only way we're going to be able to advance our state. And so that's probably what we're really going to be talking about here is, how do we, with lack of infrastructure, how do we get into these remote areas and how do we service these remote areas? So I'll leave it at that and then leave it to the next guys.
Thanks a lot, Jimmy. Appreciate that. And if you've ever been up to Alaska, you really can appreciate the grandness of the space that's up there. And the cooperative aircraft and uncooperative aircraft, there's plenty of folks that fly up there in bush planes and things that don't want to even report where they are. So there's a unique challenge which they have up there. We still have it down here, but it's a great use case of what's going on in Alaska. Okay, Matt, so closer to home, Marina Municipal Airport.
Yes, the Marina Municipal Airport. Again, Matt Nelson. I've been there for about a year now. Just a quick background on myself and why there's some relevance to it. Previous to Marina, I was the Director of Operations at the Mojave Air and Spaceport. If you're not familiar with the Mojave Air and Spaceport, it's America's first inland spaceport, which is a captive carry airport. Well, why is that important? When they would launch captive carry fixed wing aircraft into off the shore of Long Beach, would have a TFR, we would have a rolling TFR, would have basically the airspace closed. And the communications were clear, people would get excited, they'd be over the moon literally with these rockets being, these nanosats launched into space. If you now look at Marina, what we have to do is we have to get ahead of the message of urban air mobility, eVTOLs, and what does that look like to the common user? So everyone loves a good rocket launch. There's really very few people who are upset about that. What we have to do is get in front of the messaging and how we establish these corridors and what these corridors look like. So I think the last thing we want to do is become the industry that's known as flying rich people around. We need to give the message where we're not only providing mobility for folks and people that are flying around, but we also need to give the message that, hey, the drone that you might see up there might be delivering your mom's medicines, and not necessarily as yesterday, cookies and cream ice cream to your neighbor at 3 in the morning. So I think the biggest takeaway today is to really, really get that messaging across with these airspace corridors. And what do those look like? It's a work in progress.
Yeah, well stated there. And really important that we take those small initial steps so we can start to learn from smaller cases and then build from there. So we're not trying to do this all at once. We're just trying to do it piece by piece.
And if I could add on to that, too, Chris, you know, it's that crawl, walk, run scenario that we discussed yesterday. And I think these case studies of taking these short hops from, say, Marina to Salinas line-of-sight flights with a corridor that we make up or invent and then build and make that scalable. So I think if we do an automatic rollout with whatever that corridor looks like, we're going to run into problems.
Great. Yeah, I can't agree more. So John, why don't you jump in and tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're doing?
Sure. So I basically refer to myself as the plumber of advanced aerial mobility. There are lots of really smart people, but you still need a plumber if you want the water to come in and the other stuff to go away. So, you know, what my company does is we set up these flight information exchanges. So we have them running in production here on the Central Coast, in Northeast Ohio, in the Commonwealth of Virginia. We're working on setting one up in Alaska. We're working on setting one up in Oklahoma, setting one up in Pennsylvania. The premise of all of this is to work through state and regional and local government to create public digital services. So basically providing navigational aids and assistance, providing weather data, providing data from publicly owned sensors to help create some of those common data services so that all aircraft can operate safely, efficiently, legally. And I'll add kind of two kind of thoughts just really quickly. So one, in my view, AAM is everything. People tend to have, the drones or eVTOL. No, it's everything. It's everything from a small UAS that does a delivery to an urban air mobility vehicle that creates regional passenger mobility to, you know, autonomous cargo aircraft that can bring things to villages. It includes general aviation because we can improve safety in general aviation with the same technology. The other, you know, comment briefly is that the term I like to use, by the way, I like to refer to service areas or service volumes. And part of the reason is that that's kind of the way the FAA calls stuff. But the other reason is that, you know, it's an aircraft. You can go anywhere that it is safe and legal to fly. And you have the ability to land. And so when we think about service volumes, we build a corridor from Marina, let's say, to Hollister. Those aircraft, if we have safe, legal landing areas, can service communities in between Marina and Hollister if we have the infrastructure. So, thank you, Chris.
Yeah, thanks a lot, John. Great insight into how we can get this started and make it safe. Yeah, so Matt, give us your background and input.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, so Matt Beatty, my path to AAM was circuitous. It was through the Marine Corps watching live predator feeds in forward deployed areas, and then into the tech startup scene and SaaS space. And then, while I was at Berkeley, actually, at Haas, understanding what the national campaign was doing at Ames triggered a wild curiosity in me to take a turn into this space. And my first landing spot was at AirMap, and so you heard Raja say the term UTM, and that's for UAS, or drone traffic management. And really what we were doing at AirMap was pioneering how you would digitize the information that drone pilots would need to fly their drones safely, responsibly, and transparently in accordance with the rule sets and the advisories that were published by the FAA and by other responsible actors. There's other companies that have continued that forward. AirMap moved on to be acquired by DroneUp, and there are other UTM service providers that are continuing to evolve that technology. But DroneUp, in my role there, we were actually commercializing retail last mile delivery in partnership with Walmart. So some of you may think about drones doing deliveries still in the concept of the ethereal, but this is happening. It is literally happening, airspace over communities in Orlando, in Tampa Bay, in Dallas-Fort Worth, Phoenix, Virginia. And so there's many areas where drones are actually enabled to operate under commercial airspace, and some of them under different rules. So with UPS Flight Forward and their Matternet platform, they're capable of, in some service volumes, operating beyond visual line of sight as part of Part 135 operations. So that's a one set of rules. You have DroneUp that is operating under the Part 107 rules, which is a whole nother set of rules currently. But you have technologies, these novel technologies, that are operating commercially in airspace simultaneous to some of these platforms like John was talking about that are, yes, the taxis, their taxis, the eVTOLs that we've talked so much about with the presentations by Joby, but we also have the reliable robotics, X-Wing, and other these autonomous softwares that are being applied to certified aviation platforms today. We have all sorts of different novel technologies that are entering the airspace, and all those technologies may be flown under different sets of FAA rules, but they all need common services and data exchange in order for them to fly safely and transparently and to share that service volume together. And so that's really what I feel very passionate about, is an opportunity here in Central California where we have these technologies and platforms flying right now, today.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. That was a great overview, and I think that that's kind of part of what we're trying to do here in this region, is make that a reality. And we have done some small steps with the University of Alaska Fairbanks and my company Airspace Integration. We worked on a COSTA program out of the Hollister Airport that enabled getting assets, aerial assets, out of regular airspace and into a FIRES TFR. So that partnership was really important, and I think we progressed with that. John was involved with that with his company too. The airports are really important, and the work that Matt's currently doing with us with Monterey Bay DART is critical. And so we want to really be the glue that can make that happen, and we want to get Caltrans involved in that as well, and other community entities such as the Salinas Airport and Hollister Airport, and really expand on those further. So the first question I have for you all is kind of these airport service areas or volumes, in that, you know, how do we create that volume, and then what services are really needed to be present in each one of those volumes? So Matt Beatty, why don't you kick it off and answer that question?
Yeah, I think what I love about the summit here so far and the symposium so far is that it starts with the community and really understanding what the needs of that community are. And I think, some of the things that you tackled in the Costa program, it really showcases that. In California, wildfire disaster is a major concern. There is a major community need with regards to that. We will hear later today about the need for emergency medical services being transformed and delivered by these novel technologies as well. I think the first step, in my opinion, is always asking, how is the community going to benefit from those services? That is the number one thing to identify so that you can start to move on to, okay, technically, how do we help deliver those services? What are the platforms and the operators that make sense to bring those services to the community that they really need?
Great, yeah, appreciate that. And then how about at the airport, Matt? What can be added at, let's say, at Marina Municipal Airport as a service that would benefit this ecosystem?
A benefit in terms of services provided, or?
Well, radar access. I know you have an FAA radar on site. They could be weathered, higher resolution weather, let's say between, let's say we're trying to get between Marina and Hollister airports.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I think obviously the low-hanging fruit that's inexpensive, like ADS-B. ADS-B is it's been a game changer the last few years with the proliferation of that.
And maybe describe ADS-B for those.
Well, John can do a much better job on describing it. ADS-B essentially interfaces between aircraft. They tell each other. It's similar to TCAS, Traffic Collision Avoidance System. It doesn't provide resolution, it doesn't provide conflict resolution, but it also tells you what your proximity is to other aircraft. Radar, primary facility radars can track ADS-B, and it is a requirement. So if you have that on your aircraft, I expect that Joby aircraft will have, or eVTOLs will have ADS-B requirements on that as well, whether they're 135 or eventually maybe 121. I think John and I were speaking yesterday about the services that New York has in Syracuse and how prohibitive some of those costs are. John's going to talk about this. I'm going to put him on the spot. We think we can do this type of service here for just about $1 million with coverage from King City to Hollister, Marina, even Monterey and Salinas Airport and San Martin Airport. So another thing too is to get the prices low with our 5G network, because with 5G, that's where you get the connectivity. We still don't have that connectivity here. So those are some areas there. Since you didn't ask a question, I'm going to answer something here too. As an airport manager, airport noise is emotional. You can have, even though this is unrelated to your question, Chris, you can have a Harley Davidson, no offense to Harley Davidsons, with a loud tailpipe setting off car alarms. No one gets upset about it, whereas you might have a quiet aircraft fly over your head and you're irate because it buzzed your house and your kids got scared. So we really have to get ahead of that message and articulate what they provide in terms of services for airport users and for people who are not involved with the airport. So, John, you better talk about this ADS-B and the connectivity.
Yeah, jump in there, John.
Yeah, so I think a couple of thoughts. And so talk about ADS-B. First, I actually want to piggyback on something Matt said about community benefit. So I paint a vision here, because in a number of these regional projects, one of the applications we're looking at is medical delivery. So we can deliver defibrillators, Narcan, and Epi by drone. And what's really neat is you can actually do the math as to how many lives you can save. So like we can go to Tina Nieto and get the dispatch data as to how many cardiac arrests, opioid overdoses, and allergic shock the sheriff's office replies to. And we can actually calculate the number of lives that we could save every year. And it's not a small number. It's hundreds. It's hundreds of lives. So ADS-B is a great segue into infrastructure and services. So ADS-B stands for Automatic Dependent Surveillance Broadcast. And what it does is it relies on the aircraft operator to be responsible and to broadcast their position. However, it is not required everywhere. And that's partly because the FAA accommodates people whose aircraft don't have the ability to do this. So one of the other things that we discussed yesterday is some of the other services that we can create to make the airspace safe and effective. So I'll share a couple of examples. We talked about radar. There are video cameras. There are other ways to identify something in the air so that you can make all of the participants, all of the pilots, all of the operators aware of things so that they can stay clear of each other. I can jokingly summarize the FAA's safety regulations as don't hit anything. I don't think the FAA would legally agree with that definition, but it's a pretty good summary. It's about right. So then the other thing, Matt talked about noise. So actually, the other thing that we can do as a service, and this is a little bit of the workshop yesterday, is we work with the community to define preferred flight areas and flight areas that might be risky because of what's on the ground or the traffic density. And by doing that, we can help operators operate better. We can help respect the equities of the community. We can also help improve safety, and in FAA speak, that's called a procedural deconfliction. Right? That's why for airports, there's a very specific traffic pattern. And by helping everyone understand the traffic pattern and the procedures in the airspace and who's flying, right, we can avoid most of the danger, most of the risk. If you do it right, you make the old lady happy because the helicopter's not buzzing her house.
If I may, there was an example. Let me give an example during the closure of Highway 1, Big Sur, about 3 years ago. They were flying helicopters from Monterey down to a particular well-known spot in Big Sur. Well, the folks in Monterey, rightfully so, were starting to get irritated by the folks, the onesies and twosies being flown by helicopter. And so I think the last thing we want to do is have these aircraft flying around willy-nilly without a flight pattern or approach or departure procedure. And so my 2 cents, I think if we're to fly like helicopters, it's not going to be a good outcome. If we start adopting and respecting corridors and flight paths and recommended flight paths, that's what we need to do.
Yeah, and communication is a big part of that. Letting, particularly in this area where the general aviation community, it's like a freedom. They like that freedom. And I know, maybe Jimmy, give us a little background on the services that, lack of, or just the attitude of the general aviation community up in Alaska.
Is that all right? Sorry, that's a pretty loaded question. Sorry. Well, just to bring this back, actually, kind of to really more of what we're trying to talk about, which is the integration into the national airspace, right? And so I know we've talked a lot, or you guys have brought up corridors and stuff like that, and coming back to general aviation and their apprehension towards things. That is a definition that we need to be very cautious about when we're defining airspace. Right, so as we're doing this and we're enabling aircraft into the national airspace, because as one of the 7 test sites for the FAA, that's really what our main mission is: safe integration of UAS into the national airspace. So that's what we're really looking at, and I appreciate Matt that you brought up, where are those areas or where are those routes that are currently being mostly utilized. Joby's presentation earlier was showing that. Where are these regional airports that we think the traffic is going between those? And what you do then is you start to enable those operations. And what you'll start to see is you probably have a lot of infrastructure in those areas to support those aircraft currently. And so, as John was mentioning, it's getting to that. But back to the general aviation, right? So general aviation in Alaska isn't supported very well. Aviation isn't supported very well in Alaska. And so we really are looking at this from an aviation safety perspective, is that if you can give general aviation, if you can give manned aviation the tools they need to have better situational awareness, we're more than likely not going to have the kind of accident rates that we have. So recently, the FAA just released their safety initiative report. their FASI report, which was heavily concentrated or had its own section on Alaska. For those that don't know, 44% of all fatal incursions in the United States happen in Alaska. Right? That's not a good number, and that number has been going up, which is very frustrating for Alaska. We recently just had our congresswoman's husband die in a plane crash. We lost, our first congressman in a plane crash back in the 70s with the Speaker of the House, right? So we have a pattern. Our famous Senator Ted Stevens, after he was out of the Senate, died in a plane crash. So these are things that we would like to resolve in Alaska. This isn't necessarily a drone into the airspace problem. This is actually an airspace integration problem itself. We really need to be looking at what are the tools or what is the infrastructure that we're putting in place now to support manned aviation. And that's really when we look at GA is, are we giving them that support? And so when we come back to regional airports, right, do those regional airports have the infrastructure in place currently to support a 185 with a glass cockpit? I mean, do they? I mean, and if it's doing a left-hand approach into that regional airport, I would say it probably doesn't have the infrastructure to support that glass cockpit. And so now you start to look at, well, if you have the infrastructure in place at these regional airports, which they were abandoned after 9/11 for security reasons, right? We all abandoned our regional airports after 9/11. But if you start to put the infrastructure in place in your regional airports to support IFR landings, well, guess who's going to start showing back up at those airports for regional deliveries? UPS, FedEx, because the infrastructure supports those airplanes. So to come back to what you guys were talking about too in Alaska, so we had Merlin Labs fly their unmanned Cessna Grand Caravan in Alaska. They did 28 takeoff and landings. Is that correct, Nick? 28 takeoff and landings? Thank you. Sorry, my deputy director, Nick Adkins, is back there. You saw him in the video with the cool beard. So, yeah, he's looking around like no one's seen him. But what we found out, right, is even with the lack of infrastructure in Alaska, that Cessna Grand Caravan flying autonomously was performing 90% of its mission, right? So it's now looking at where are those holes in your comms, your navs, your surveillance, your weather, right? Weather is an enormous problem in the United States when it comes to accurate weather reporting for your aircraft. What we were finding out is even the Merlin Labs plane was able to accurately predict some weather or get weather to fly around so it wouldn't go through weather. Well, in Alaska, general aviation, we don't have those services a lot of times. A lot of times when we're taking off from an airport and we're going 200 miles, we're calling back to Anchorage Center to figure out what's going on 400 miles away from that airport. So really, what we're really looking at when we're talking about safe integration in the national airspace is, let's provide services to our general aviation and to our commercial aviation from a manned perspective so we can lower our death rates that we have. And by doing that, we're probably going to very, very slowly, or not slowly, I would say more incrementally, introduce UAS or drones into the national airspace because they will be operating under the same services that we're already providing. So that kind of helps.
Yeah, definitely, Jimmy. Thank you for that perspective because it's good to hear that. And we even in Watsonville here, we had a mid-air collision not too long ago. You might have heard of it or not, but really a tragic event at the Watsonville airport, and there have been other issues, close calls, and so improving our infrastructure just in general for manned aircraft is a good place to start. Yeah. So I heard the number $1 million come up. So, what is this money used for? And, John, why don't you jump in?
Okay, thank you, Chris, and thank you for outing me. And Jimmy, right on about aviation and safety, right? It's all aviation. Drones allow us to do some really cool use cases for delivery and servicing residents. Technologies like Joby open up new opportunities for passenger transport, technologies like Merlin for cargo, but in the end, it's all aviation. It's about navigating safely, avoiding weather, right? Landing safely, avoiding conflicts, and so I think if we think about it that way, we think about it as a whole system, and that different vehicles may do different things and have different technology or communications requirements, but if we think about it holistically, this actually gets a lot simpler. And that gets back to that $1 million. And so if we think about a regional system, right? If we think about Marina, Hollister, San Martin, King City, and CA-66 as a collection of general aviation airfields in a regional system, what do we need to do? Well, we need to enable improved safety for general aviation and integration of new aircraft that behave differently. Right? The Joby, for all practical purposes, looks like general aviation. It's a Part 135 aircraft. But it has a different approach and departure procedure because of the nature of the technology. So we have to integrate that into the air traffic. We have to help make other GA pilots aware, because as of right now, there are no 172 pilots that have interacted with a Joby-on approach. So we have to make them aware so that other pilot can do their part to be safe. We integrate drones. So maybe the drones will be moving cargo to and from Hollister Airport, right? So maybe we use, something like a Merlin to move cargo from Marina to Hollister, and then a drone takes the cargo from Hollister and moves it out to a farm.
But to jump in there, at the same time, yes, you are integrating something new, and it has new procedures, but there's already existing procedures and policies that those companies do need to understand exist. And they need to also conform to, hey, just because we're new and novel doesn't mean that we don't also need to fit into what's existing.
So now let me jump in and let me talk about what it costs. Because I know that that number is a tempting number because it's 1/100th of the cost of what New York has spent. Not to pick on them, they're really good people. They did really cool research. But if you think about this, we have a concept that actually, the people on the stage, we all work together a lot. You probably figured that out. We all know each other well. And we've been working on this concept of what we call minimum viable infrastructure, which is about what do you really need to enable services to the community, integration of new aircraft, and how do you do it in a way that is sustainable? And it really comes down to thinking about the services that you're trying to enable and how to do it safely. So, for example, if let's go last mile, I'm the drone delivering the good to the field worker at the farm. That drone is probably flying at very low altitude. There probably isn't a lot of stuff underneath it apart from crops. There probably aren't a lot of other aircraft around. So the level of services that you need is modest. So basically you can use basic antennas to receive transponder data, and you can cover that for less than $1,000 a square mile. So if you're thinking about a 100 square mile service area, to get pervasive remote ID and ADS-B coverage, remote ID is the transponder for the drone, ADS-B is for conventional aircraft, you can cover that whole area for $100,000, $150,000. So then move up a level, right? So now maybe around that GA airport, you have some medium density residential and commercial development. Well, okay, so that's a little riskier, right? Because if something falls from the sky, it may hit a person. So now what I need to do is up it a little bit. I've already got my remote ID and ADS-B coverage, so maybe I lay over that, I lay some radio detection or some cameras. Well, now you're talking maybe $15,000, $20,000 a square mile, but you're only doing 5 to 8 square miles. So, okay, so now you slap on another $150,000, you're at $300,000, and then you get to the airport itself. And that's where you start to put some of these next generation radars that, compared to traditional radars are pretty cheap, but are the most expensive unit because you're going to spend $75,000 or $100,000 a square mile, but that's where the bulk of your safety risk is. And so by doing this kind of incremental, safety-based, risk-based approach, you actually really focus the services where you need them for safety and integration, and you can actually drive the cost down a lot.
And what you're also doing is you're actually identifying your actual use cases. So one of the big things that, especially up in Alaska, we don't have the luxury, A, of a lot of financing, but B, of being able to really go out and play with something. Like, hey, we're gonna go look at this because we think this might look neat over here. We really have to concentrate on, is this a mission that's going to get us somewhere? Is it making progress for us? Is it solving an actual problem for us in Alaska? Because we're so cost prohibitive, our weather is so dynamic that we really need to make sure that as we're doing this, are we solving the problem? So as what John is getting to, as you start to ratchet up what you're doing, you're gonna find out what you're really doing in aviation and really what you're really enabling. Because I think, you know, from the perspective of, hey, we're gonna get drones to your doorstep in the next 5 years, that maybe wasn't as realistic as, hey, these are some real opportunities to help public service, to help maybe some larger cargo companies, and to maybe help some folks that want to do mapping and surveilling or ag, things like that. But when you really look at the kind of opportunities that you're trying to enable, I think and focus in on those, I think you'll also find out that you're going to have a much faster pathway to commercialization.
Yeah, and we have some amazing use cases here in this region. And Matt, Beatty, you know, comment on use cases or pricing and costs. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So when it comes to pricing and cost, you know, talking about this minimum viable infrastructure, we're talking a little bit about the hardware side of this, but what I loved about what Raja mentioned earlier is the preponderance of the investment that California has the opportunity to make isn't in this hardware-centric, you know, massive defense integrator type of system with a network operations center that manages all of California from one singular place. What we have the opportunity to do is to invest in common services that are data exchange services that enable all actors and novel technologies entering into the national airspace system. And that can even take the form of vehicle-to-vehicle Internet of Things types of communications that need to happen in real time versus information being sent to some network operations center and someone manually deconflicting operations. What we have the opportunity to invest in is data, and California does data really well. And we have a lot of academic institutions already tackling that here in this region and area. And so when we look at the investment that we have the opportunity to make that enable these different types of use cases, that's where we can make a spend. That's where we can make a focus. That's where we can forge the path in a way that is going to lead the rest of the world in AAM. And I think back to use cases, you know, Chris, you and I have talked about things that can be done and have been done and modeled out of CA 66 over at Monterey Bay Academy, and the potential, as we mentioned, for wildfire suppression, detection, medical deliveries, but also you know, agricultural application operations, and that being deconflicted. As I was coming down the one earlier today, I saw a helicopter applying product onto crops, and you know, if we think about the scenario John talked about, there's going to need to be delivery or could be delivery to the fields and the agricultural workers by drone that will need to be deconflicted with that aircraft. And by the way, agricultural spraying is one of the most dangerous types of aviation operations in manned aviation today. So there's potential there, and there is actually being done that through drones today. So I think there's so many different and diverse use cases that can be addressed by these novel technologies, whether it's drones, whether it's the unmanned standard aviation platforms, whether it's the eVTOLs, but all of them still need more data and more services that are common to all actors that will help us all participate in the airspace in the safe, responsible, efficient, and transparent way that is going to enable all those actors.
Yep, start off small and build from there, and we don't need to do anything amazing out of the gate, you know. So, Matt Nelson, any perspective from the airport side of the equation?
Sure. You know, I have a couple comments, couple observations. You know, the FAA does a wonderful. There are many bright people in the FAA. like many municipalities and agencies, they're understaffed, they're overworked, and they're simply not in the business of necessarily creating out-of-the-box strategies and best practices for a nascent industry such as eVTOLs and UAS, drones. So I really think it's incumbent on us here to help and assist the FAA, whether that's through a 3P or helping guide them and allowing us to collaborate. That's going to be the fastest way. What I'm seeing now, almost every day from my office, is the huge leaps that Joby's making. Joby is almost in the sprinting phase of their development now, whereas I notice, and no slam on the FAA, they're behind. And that's going to be the pinch point. The pinch point's going to be regulations and what the roadmap looks like here. So I think we really, really need to get involved now. Maybe we should have got involved yesterday, but we're behind the power curve on this.
And John?
Thank you. The light just changed. So I just wanted to add something, Matt, to what you said, right? So yeah, the FAA is not in the business of solving your problem for you. On the same note, I'm, I don't think anybody up here is, but I'm not an FAA basher. They try to be helpful given what they do. And one thing that we found is that you can actually do quite a bit under the current regulation if you're very thoughtful about how you do it, and you're very mindful, and you engage with the FAA early and often. You'd be surprised what you can do. The other thing that I think is really interesting is Matt talked about the need to have, pervasive data and pervasive awareness and investments that California can make. I think there's a really awesome role here for state and local government to act as the disinterested facilitator of a lot of this data exchange and data interchange and the disinterested facilitator of how things get set up on the ground. There are already municipal airports that are in the community that understand airspace, and by giving that kind of disinterested party, you're giving a gift to industry that helps industry grow because you're giving them things they need to operate safely and comply with the FAA's rules. So I think there's actually a lot of leeway to do really great stuff without necessarily having to go, convince Congress to rewrite the rules.
Right, and that's what I'm excited about, being an entrepreneur and doing new and innovative things. We're looking for other people to kind of join us in this, take part in this. And for those that haven't heard, we're going to, on Sunday at Monterey Bay Academy, CA 66, we're going to have a fly-in with manned aircraft and drones and John's system, and we're going to be testing some of this out kind of on a kind of beginning starting point. So welcome to join us on this coming Sunday. So the other thing I wanted to bring up was just how does this help the general public, because I think we really kind of have to sell it in that way. And I can think of one that we have. We're right on the coast on the Monterey Bay. I know we have great white sharks out there. Somebody was killed by a juvenile great white shark that got bitten in the back of the leg. He was a surfer and bled out, So I constantly look out there and, from the beach level, you look out, you don't see any sharks, but from the air right off the coast, you would see some sharks, So having, the ability to go fly just in this region and look at the wildlife in that area, it would be a simple call to the lifeguard saying, hey, let's bring you guys in here, So from my perspective, that's like an easy win. So I know others have been mentioned, but, Jimmy, do you want to, in a really rural place, getting things to people quickly and efficiently, could be a big benefit.
Sorry, I'll touch on just a quick couple of things since we have to wrap up. But yes, for us, reducing the cost of logistics in Alaska is enormous. For those that don't know, the federal government spends close to about $1 billion a year subsidizing freight to rural Alaska. So at some point, right, we need to make that service a little bit more efficient on the federal taxpayers, right? But realistically speaking, we're looking at this as a holistic thing, and you were talking about how do we kind of move some of this forward and partnerships and things like that. One of the reasons the University of Alaska Fairbanks is down here is because is the need to have partners like folks in California or our partners in Oregon or across the rest of the U.S. So the unique thing about this test site is we're a little bit different than the other 6 test sites out of the 7, is one, we're a lot more operational, but 2, we're much more willing to go into others' backyards and to help them stand up. So one of the reasons we are down here is so that California has access to the FAA test site through our authority. And so we've done that through Chris Bley and his group, you guys' group, Byron Airport up in Contra Costa County, as well as if San Bernardino is coming online and Ventura County as well. And one of the other things that we're looking at doing through Chris's group and some others is pretty much opening up the entire central area of California from around Byron Airport all the way past Merced. I think we even want to look at going past Fresno in a certificate of authorization for UAS in California. So what this will really help you guys do is start to link up your regional airports for these longer range missions, but also to look at, where in your rural areas can you start to put together operations with your public support missions and things like that. So for us, the really is expansion of the test site, so that way we can really help the mission of the FAA of this safe integration into the national airspace of UAS. So for us, the partnership with California and Alaska, as long as our other partners, I see Kenji right there with Oregon, is really, really important to us. And also, California needs to be reaching out with Oregon and working with them. I mean, no pun intended, but the fastest growing natural disaster in the United States right now is wildfire. It is absolutely decimating Alaska every summer. I know you guys go through hundreds of thousands of acres. We go through millions of acres in a summer when it comes to burn. So when it comes to air quality and things like that, getting that under control is huge for us, and having a Western States Alliance on how we mitigate wildfires is really important to us. So that's us from Alaska.
Yeah, thanks for making those collaborative effort connections, because they're really critical in making this a reality. Matt B?
Yeah, I think if we're talking about how we deliver the value to the community, it really does come down to shedding off the acronyms, the jargon, and engaging in dialogue with the community and talking to them directly through some of the community-based organizations that have the trust of the community that we were discussing yesterday in our workshops, and being collaborative. And that takes intention. Whether you are a public operator of drones or any kind of operation, or whether you are an industry operator, it takes intention, it takes resources, it takes investment to do it. But it is absolutely critical, because technology for technology's sake, or because what that value can be, it won't be leveraged, it won't be used, it won't be embraced, it won't be accepted by the community unless you're able to tell that story and help them connect to that value in terms that mean something to them. And so, for one example, being a part of Drone Up, part of my job was to go to the communities that we were expanding service to and help them understand how we were going to operate in a safe, efficient, reliable and responsible, transparent way with them. But in addition to that, in addition to helping them understand how we were going to operate in ways that observed their advisories, as John was talking about, it was helping them understand, why do people need last mile retail delivery? And it seems like a novelty to a lot of folks, but there's a real value to that for people who are homebound or have mobility issues, or service providers that live in-house with them, that when they need to go to the store, that creates a real problem for them. And so there is real value in the community, even just in that one small use case, that needs to be explained a little bit better in dialogue with community, instead of just, oh, it's cool that a drone is flying and dropping something from the sky for me. You really do have to have the conversations, and I think that's full circle back around to what we were talking about yesterday.
Right, your novelty comment made me think about in the 90s how somebody would have a phone in their car. That was the first thing that popped into my head, is like, who needs a phone in their car? I got a phone in my house, So, John or Matt, you want to comment?
Yeah, it's actually pretty funny about the phone in the car comment, because, the infrastructure wasn't there. So in a lot of cases, it was really just bragging rights. And I don't know, I might be dating myself, but in the late 80s, early 90s, there was actually a product called the car phony, that was a fake car phone that you could put in your car to make yourself look important. And so that, you know, but to your point, and Matt, to your point, you have to show people how their life is going to be better. The technology's great. We all love the technology because we're nerds. But you have to show people, without the jargon, how you're going to make their life better. And for me, the one that I'm a big supporter of, is, as anyone who knows me knows, is medical. This technology right now has the ability to make a substantial difference in people's lives. 2 examples. Blood products. We're always short of blood products. We can very quickly move blood products between GA airports very cheaply by medical standards. That's right. You know, healthcare is expensive, but we can very cheaply get stuff out to communities that need it when we really can't afford the infrastructure to have it there all the time. And then again, I'm driving back to my hotel last night on this very lonely road. I think it's Cooper Road. And I'm thinking to myself, you're out there working in the field, you get injured. How long is it going to take to get emergency medical equipment to you? Even if there's an EMT there, right? How long is it going to take? You can have a drone in a box that can be there in 3 to 5 minutes with equipment, blood products, tourniquets, right? And you know, if the cost of that is $500, again, by medical standards, you're saving money. So it is a winning argument. Now, I'll share my second favorite idea, which is I would love to be able, around the Central Coast, to be able to drop an It's It on a little tiny parachute. Because it would just be so cool.
The ice cream that we have.
The ice cream, yeah.
And Matt?
I'd like to see more focus on the ag industry and the applications that can be realized from this. You know, many of you are from here. We are known as the salable capital of the world. Also, we have a few grapes to brag about as well. So I think that provides tremendous value when you're feeding America. And a little off topic, when the iPhone was invented, I think initially it was designed to be a telephone, but I don't think we had any idea at that time, 20 plus years ago, how many applications now are involved with a smart device. And so I think by Chris asking us today is almost an unfair question because there's so many possibilities that we haven't realized yet. And so I think it's incumbent to perhaps, it'd be great, I mean, these symposiums are so wonderful where you're essentially sequestered with a couple pots of coffee, so to speak, and all these wonderful ideas come together and coalesce. So it's just amazing to see this. So that's just my 2 cents. But I think if we focus on the ag industry and helping support that with whatever that looks like, there's tremendous value there.
Thanks.
Really quickly, just to jump on that, speaking of symposiums, and I'm going to get my shameless plug in. If you guys make it up to Alaska, August 11th through the 13th, 2024, Global Autonomous Systems Conference. But it's really what we're doing is talking about all autonomy and how to solve kind of these problems with that. So Anchorage, Alaska, come on now.
Yeah, and I was there this year too. Yeah, I highly recommend going. So Brad, do you have some questions down there from the audience?
Yep, I do. I mean, give me half a second to get them live again. There we go. Put my glasses on so I can read them. So there's a couple questions here that build on themes that you've touched on, but maybe we could spend a moment directly on the question of if these integration corridors are created, if there's an integration corridor created in our region, what kinds of economic development opportunities does that create for us?
First of all, I'd still want to caution you on saying corridor.
Okay.
Right, because one, from an aviation standpoint, right, you're looking at then are you charting that? And is that now a restricted airspace in terms of how you fly in that? That's why we caution on saying corridor. And so when we say you're enabling the operation, you're enabling the economic opportunity, right? So what you're really looking at is the economic opportunity at the same time that you're enabling it, because you're not going to enable something to enable something. You're really enabling the economic opportunity.
And so the question is about, well, what might those look like?
Yep.
Yes.
So I'll add a couple thoughts on economic opportunity, right? I travel all over the country. And every place is different and unique, but the same. So a lot of these Central Valley communities have a lot in common with small towns in West Virginia, which is you've got a small town, it's an hour away from the nearest hospital, right? It's 45 minutes from the nearest school, and the town struggles because you can't get services in there. And the economics don't work to build a hospital in a 300-person town. But with these enabled airspaces and these new services, you know, to harp on the medical example, I could now have a small clinic with trained professionals, right, who may be part-time, but I can get goods and equipment in there on the fly, on 30 minutes notice, when it's needed, and I can re-enable medical service to this community, right? Like in Alaska, Jimmy's talking about, you can get fresh produce and milk, not a problem in California, but, you know, certainly in Alaska and West Virginia, you can get these things into these towns. And so for starters, you can actually start to breathe life into these towns again because you're reconnecting them to the logistics that they've been cut off of because in our current system, the economics just don't work. And then I think the other opportunity is if you're enabling these services, these are new modes of transportation, new vehicles, right? These facilities have to get staffed. These vehicles have to get maintained, right? So there's a lot of, one of the cool things about this industry is that there are a lot of really good jobs that you don't have to go to college for, right? And not to pick on college, but, you know, there are a lot of people that aren't going to go to a four-year school. And I think there's a chance here to create really good, you know, well-paying jobs for people who may not want to go to university for 4 years.
Yeah, just to piggyback on that, as far as the commercial operator perspective, I mean, we've seen it play out with Zipline, even in the early days, and going to Africa and implementing medical delivery there, and as they did that, training people within those economies and within those communities to have significant technical, well-paying jobs. And that's happening in some of the other communities that I mentioned earlier. The expanded commercial delivery opportunities that DroneUp was doing, or is doing, and Wing, Amazon Prime Air down the road, they all create technical, great-paying jobs where the hubs that open up for those delivery operations are employing people with a livable wage for that area and above livable wage, without the investment of 5 to 6 years at a university, absolutely necessary to that. And that helps propel the industry forward. It's almost a flywheel once you start to see that happening, because once you have the one or two operators attracted to an area, then others come. You see this happening in Dallas-Fort Worth right now. You have Flytrex, you have Wing, you have DroneUp, you have others that are in that DFW area, and now you're getting commercial operations sharing airspace and sharing the resources. And so it is a flywheel effect as you see that attraction happening.
Jimmy?
Sorry to come back to like really answer your question about what are the specific commercial opportunities. So this is where I'm going to come back. This is not probably not the best answer to your question, but it really is dependent on the community, right? So you look in Alaska, our commercial opportunities with UAVs is going to be far different than this area. So so that's why I get back to, you know, really studying what is the actual commercial operation before you start to develop something. And this was touched on the panel before us about, you know, why did New York or why did North Dakota spend hundreds of millions of dollars on systems when you start to look at what are the commercial opportunities inside that system, right? Are you actually going to be delivering cargo between Fargo and Grand Forks? What is that a commercial opportunity? I can't answer that for North Dakota. I don't know what their freight lines look between those two towns. I don't know what the congestion. You know, I don't know. I know in Alaska that having between Fairbanks and Anchorage that's probably not as important to us because of the road system as it is going from Fairbanks to Galena, because Galena is 200 miles off the road system, right? So this is where, when you've got to be very concentrated on what are you enabling for the aviation industry, and is that actually a commercial opportunity? And so that's why we come back to look at your regional airports, because that is what Joby's trying to do, right? They're trying to get between their regional airports to bring that service back. I mean, communities have spent a lot of money on their regional and public airports. That's a lot of public infrastructure dollars that would go to waste if we don't start using them again. And so that's why, again, look at those regional opportunities. What are you trying to connect with aviation? And then putting the infrastructure around that. And this is why minimal viable infrastructure makes more sense, because you're really looking at what are the gaps that are currently there, and how do I fill those gaps to make this operation work?
Well, great. Yeah, that's all excellent input. And, you know, just one final question to Matt Nelson here, being the airport manager at the Marina Municipal Airport, and Joby being there too. I'm just thinking, what do you think there would be a win if there was like a direct flight from the Marina Airport to San Jose Airport? And would people use that? Yeah.
I'd be the first one. Absolutely.
Well, yeah.
I think Marina, obviously we're open for business, and we are very excited about that. The answer is yes, Chris. Yes to San Jose, yes to Oakland and SFO. You know, we've got some incredibly bright people here in the county, in Silicon Valley as well. So just amazing how, in my short time in Marina, how things have so quickly developed with Joby Aviation. So again, I go back to, we really need to help support the FAA. We need to help lift them up, and if we're waiting for them to provide policy and procedure and direction, we're sorely mistaken. So this is a call to arms to get everyone involved here to help facilitate this industry.
Yeah, and I think we're all ready to take those small steps and make that a reality. And so I'm hoping in my lifetime, you know, or even a lot sooner, yeah, that we'll be there, yeah, yeah. Okay, I wanted to thank my panel. Thank you very much for participating in this conversation.
Great discussion. Thank you. Great. All right, thank you. That was great. Thank you, appreciate it. Okay, it's in the back. Thank you. Okay. Well, that was informative and kind of right on the spot, which I was hoping they would cover a lot of these questions. I think we got a lot more work to do in specifying the parameters of what we might be thinking about down here on the Central Coast, but we have a foundation with this software system, the Central Coast Flight Information Exchange, which you can find out about more on our website. And certainly talking to John while he's here, and Matt. But I'm intrigued, and I hope that we can push forward on this idea as a way to continue to build our infrastructure around here. So now I think we're at lunchtime, and we've got another excellent panel coming up, which will come on at 12:30. It's kind of our featured panel. It was first a keynote, and then it became affected by the potential government shutdown. And then there was a speaker thing that happened, and that affected another speaker. But this panel kind of grew into fireside chat, and we've got some amazing female leaders in the space who are going to join us on stage, led by Yolanka Wolf as the moderator. And let me see if I can get this thing to do something. I think it's frozen. In any case, Raquel Gervin with the FAA, Lori Pepper with CalSTA, and Saracina Tukin, who is with the Secretary's Office in the Department of Transportation. You say the Secretary's Office, right? Office of the Secretary. So yeah, that's going to be a great panel discussion, fireside chat, and Until then, there's going to be lunch served in the back, and Shari's waving at me that lunch is served. So please get some lunch, take a few minutes to chat and do your stuff, and then plan to come back for the 12:30 fireside chat panel. Thank you. You can go outside and enjoy the beautiful weather on the patio if you choose. Not seeing any.
Not urgent, but can I take this lunch opportunity to copy Matt's? I want his presentation.
Yeah, yeah.
And he said the easiest way is to put it on my own flash drive
Sure.
from here.
Yeah, you can get
So I'm going to move it. I'm going to add it. No, I was going to run it.
I'll let you go ahead and do, well, let me grab this. Thank you.